The reason I was excited about this panel is because there's so much, I think that, okay, with the exception of CJ, because she's CJ, and is arguably one of like the greatest female characters ever written, you know, too bad everyone else.
Not that she's biased or anything.
No, not at all. But come on now.
You're not wrong.
I'm not wrong, but I am still biased. I can be both of those. Whatchamacallit? I always find that Sorkin women get a bad rap in a lot of things. It's why I wore one of my newsroom t-shirts here too, because especially, those guys, those poor women who I love. Aaron Sorkin has always said that he doesn't try to write men or women, he just tries to write people. And I think that's true. I think that although that Aaron is absolutely an ally, I think he is totally one of the good guys as far as women are concerned. I do think that sometimes, especially when he was writing The West Wing back in the day, he maybe was like a little, wore the blinders of his own gender a little bit, because he's seeing things through his own perspective, and things don't occur to him, so, okay. And I don't blame him for that, because I look at it and I see where he's going. Like the example that comes to mind is Ainsley and the sexual harassment thing, and like I'm so there, and she's nailing every word, and then it just sort of gets a little clumsy. I find it doesn't completely go off the rails, but the argument just sort of goes off the rails a little bit, which is not so much like Ainsley, who is very precise, but it works because she's already said enough of the right things and then says funny things about going to get a peach. So there was that. Aaron likes to rate these people, and I think it shows up more in the women, but it's totally true of the men also, who are super smart, super capable, really, really good at their jobs, and are just spazzes. You're just a spaz. You are socially a spaz. For all that he, is that handsome, Sam Seaborn can't girl. The man does not know how to girl at all. And it's ridiculous. Jump in.
Yeah.
It feels like you want to say something, and I'm talking.
I agree with you. He writes people who are really good at what they do. Once they get outside their wheelhouse, they fall apart.
Yeah. Was it you that couldn't watch the newsroom? Because are you in journalism and that's why it bugged you?
It was.
I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry.
It's fine. So yesterday I had said it drove me a little crazy because it's Mackenzie, right?
Yeah.
Mackenzie throws a random spaz in the room, filled mostly with men. The reason I had an issue with it, as at that point sort of a professional woman who knew that would doom somebody in real life, was because in The West Wing there were equal spazzing. CJ spazzes, Sam spazzes, Josh spazzes, and that I didn't see that as much in the newsroom.
If you think about it,
more of a sexism thing.
If you think about it though, the very first thing we see in the newsroom is Will having a spaz, having a 10-minute spaz where it's wildly inappropriate. And I cut Mac a bit of slack because I love her, and two, because it's not any way based on anything professional. That's what's awkward about that situation, that he's her ex that she cheated on, and they're there to work together anyway. And as professional as everybody is, there's gonna be some roadblocks. And so I think the one you're talking about is when she accidentally sends the text message to the entire, first of all, that's happened to me. So, I'm like, Mac, I feel your pain. Not in quite so humiliating a fashion, with my ex and the like, but still, I found that to be a very, very human moment. And also Will was just, the gaslighting from him is horrendous. So I think that she dealt with it as best as she could, and it got better, and they got better, and I do hope that you give it another chance, because that I hear every word you're saying, and you're not wrong. But if you, the Newsroom is one of those shows where, like Firefly kind of, where every episode is better than the one that came before, you know? And there are some places where the technicalities of the plot, or, you know, there's a hole big enough to drive a truck through, I don't care. After a while, you won't care. You'll love these people so much. The women in the Newsroom really got a bad rap. I remember reading a review, and this was season 1, but they referred to Sloane, Mac, and Maggie in that order as Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest. This stupid article. And I was like, okay, excuse me? First of all, anybody who's going to say that about Sloane Sabbath can just sit their ass down. That said, Sloane Sabbath is totally socially stupid. You know, she says it herself. She's like, I am socially inept, but I know this. And you know what? I should be so socially inept. You know what I mean? She gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like that article is less about characters and more about how people view women in our society.
Yeah.
Because they're reading things into the characters that aren't there because they're not good at the things that women are supposed to be good at.
Yeah.
Like the social stuff.
And even, you know, in that first episode of the Newsroom where there's this, you know, all of this stress with Mac and Will and this whole thing, but then they go in to do a broadcast, and the second she puts on the headset, it's like boom, you know, and for the next hour, you're mine. I don't care what went on between us. You're there, I'm here, this is my job and that's yours, and you're mine and you're gonna do what I say. Tap the pen if you understand. And, oh no, and then he's the one who's sitting there, now you're just a crazy man screaming YouTube. So I think that we are more conditioned to notice it when it's women, but I do think that it isn't equal the way you want it to be, and we just notice it more when it's women, which sadly is on us. You know, that's on us as a society. We need to stop seeing that. I mean, I loved, even more than usual, when CJ when she was trying to refuse the protection, and is like, look, you're not a woman in a man's job, and this is a problem. Okay, but you're a person in, never mind your gender, you're the press secretary, you've gotten a threat, and therefore you're getting protection. Get over it. That has nothing to do with the fact, with whether or not you have a vagina. You know, so
It was that moment of protectionism that we see from Bartlett when it comes to Zoe taking her protection seriously.
Yeah.
And he had to, there were no pictures. Zoe had seen the letters, or knew about the letters, but she wasn't realizing, well, the letters hadn't started yet, no. This was before that, so there was no visual to give Zoe, so Bartlett had to scare her. With CJ, that entire monologue got ripped down, so here's a picture of you coming out of your gym. He's seen you, it's not just that he knows what you look like because you're the second most visual person out of the White House. You got a stalker, sister. Take some protection. Here's Simon. Take Simon. You know, and that's what the Secret Service is there for. So you're right. It wasn't about but if it hadn't been so serious, I can understand not wanting to be protected as much. But no, that was
Suppose it had
absolutely
been
serious.
Sam who had a stalker. How do you think he would have reacted to that?
Sam was being stalked, you know. He can't go and meet a friend of his just because she's an escort without there being photos, without, you
If he
know.
were being stalked and told he had to have protection, would he not react the same way she did?
Probably.
Because of the
Yeah.
machoism?
Yeah,
It would have been
probably.
But it would have been but I'm not the president, why are they after me response? Because Sam was always just a little bit more naive than the rest of them.
It's
I
true.
feel like if he had been presented with the same kind of photographs that CJ was, I think he would have had the same reaction he did to that.
It's like, oh my God, this is
Okay, I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry, what did you say your name was, Mr. Secret Service guy? Okay, all right.
What am I signing right now?
And he would force them to take the protection,
Yeah.
no matter which one of them it was.
But it's the same thing. He would have said the same thing he said to CJ. I can't force you to take it, so sign this. Sign this, you have to sign this to do what it would just be easier if you would do what I'm telling you, but you have to sign this. And she's like, I'm not signing that. He goes, okay, so here's a picture. Oh, wait.
And that's, yeah, and the thing is that maybe, and I'm just speculating because I don't see it that way, but like when it's him saying that to a woman, I don't know, the talking heads are gonna say, oh, and he tapped me down here because he, no, it's because he feels maternal about everybody. These are my babies.
Well,
What are you
he
doing?
said that. He
You
said
know,
that.
him
You're my
and Leo
family.
are their parents.
Yeah.
That's mom and dad.
This is
Even the
totally,
cat says
this
that.
is totally mom and
Leo's
dad.
definitely dead.
Absolutely, and this is also like after President Bartlett has been shot. So I'd be a little like, you know what, shut up now. Because and he even says that the last time somebody was aiming at one of my staffers, they missed him and hit me. So you're signing the thing. Because you know what, I don't need to go to the hospital again. So this has nothing to do with you being macho or not. So, and I love and respect him for that.
I think the Secret Service's attitude, and you see this a lot from, what's his name, the head Secret Service guy.
Ron Butterfield.
Yeah, Butterfield, is that, you know, everything I've ever heard or read about the way the Secret Service actually handles administration officials who are kind of resistant to them is basically like, I don't care.
Yeah,
You-
too bad.
Like, because I know that there's a bit of a reaction to CJ being like, oh, well, you know, you're just ignoring her wishes kind of as a woman. It's like, no, this is the way the Secret Service is with their charge. Like, I know that on 9/11, they basically burst into Dick Cheney's office and like, didn't say a word.
Yes.
Carried him out, picked him physically up and carried him out of the office. It's like,
His feet might have touched the ground somewhere between
Yeah,
his and the car.
when it goes down, the Secret Service doesn't care who you are.
And they say that plenty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's established plenty about when President Bartlett's like, I'm not going to the bunker, and Leo's like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Secret Service on the thing.
I think you're going to the damn bunker, hon. And
It's the grandfather moment from the Stackhouse filibuster when Bartlett's talking about grandfathers is that we were here before you, they'll be here after. That's how the Secret Service approaches their jobs. That's how law enforcement approaches. Your job is temporary. The best you can get is 8 years. And we're packing you up and moving you out of here. I've got a career to think about. So me keeping you alive, I get to keep my career.
Right.
So your wishes are always going to be secondary to, we'll accommodate as much, a little bit, but your feet aren't going to touch the ground on the way to London.
I
That's all
always,
there is to that. I don't care if you're male, female, or
I,
Obama's dog.
I always do sort of wonder, what on earth did Charlie Young do to evade the Secret Service?
And how did he not get a job with them?
You know, in evidence of things not seen, how on earth did what did he do? And the guards who were in the room with him are probably like, yeah, we needed to step that up a little bit, because this 22-year-old kid just
I'm gonna go with tap dance. Tap dance. That's it.
busted out of the room, but you know, bless his heart.
Yeah, I feel like from then on, what they didn't know was that Charlie was actually working for the Secret Service in secret.
Charlie went on to work for S.H.I.E.L.D., okay? When Mike Casper changed his name to Phil Coulson and just went on to work for S.H.I.E.L.D., maybe he just took Charlie with him.
Okay, I'm totally accepting that now. We've gotten way off the rails.
We did, I was just going to acknowledge I'm still on the rails because it occurred to me, I haven't heard love for this weekend for Special Agent Ron Butterfield, who was, if I may say, both the bomb and the diggity. I would absolutely, if we're talking spin-offs, I would absolutely watch the spin-off where Ron Butterfield and Nancy McNally open a private detective agency.
Domestic and international, yeah, there you go.
But, you know, okay, but using that as an excuse to circle back around to the topic we're supposed to be on. I mean, at the top of the show, who is the guy at the head of the table in the Situation Room? It's Nancy McNally,
Yeah.
you know, and boom, and everybody defers to her. And I love that, and there's never even any question. And then who takes over for her is Kate Harper, who I'm fond of.
I'm fond of her too.
And she's
I mean,
another one,
it's-
doesn't know how to doesn't know how to do it
Yeah.
at all.
Yes. I will say that Kate Harper is a lot of the reason why I became reconciled to Will Bell.
Okay,
It took me a while to warm up to.
And see, Will Bailey is the reason I don't like Kate Harper. It's like, no, back off. No, no, leave him alone. He's not yours. He's gonna be mine as soon as I can figure out how to get back into the West Wing. No, Blondie, go sit down. And those two don't make sense to me in so many ways, but you wanna talk socially awkward, Will wins that award every day.
well,
It's
yeah.
perfect.
Well,
yeah.
I get
You're easily distracted. We
Yes.
didn't have a Will versus Sam panel at this thing, and I really think we should have.
Right?
So when you mentioned Nancy McNally, who I just have so much respect for the work that it took her to get to where she is, even at the very beginning, right? We see arcs and we see growth, but the minute we meet her, she's already achieved something in her career that we just have we don't have a way to tap into that, right? We have to assume where she came and started. And the comment I'm going to make is that there are 2 times in the show where I get meta out of my head to stop and think about what these 2 women are saying. And one is Dr. Nancy McNally and the other is C.J. Craig. There are 2 points at which they are dressed socially for a very high-level state dinner, ball, something. And each of them makes reference to the fact that she says, I feel like an idiot because she's wearing this and she's in the sit room. And then C.J. McNally says, I couldn't stand behind the podium in a ball gown and make the announcement I was going to make. And each time it almost just infuriates me because I don't believe a man in a tux, no offense to any gentleman sitting in the room with us, I don't believe a man in a tux would stop and have to have that thought.
Yeah.
I was in a social setting, I'm in a circumstance, darn it, let me go just back to my room and change into business attire so that the statement I'm about to make can be taken seriously.
But I didn't see Toby taking off a cummerbund and a bow tie to do it. Not thinking to do it right.
I just.
But I can see Toby doing that because he doesn't want to wear the cummerbund.
Yeah, Toby would use any excuse to get out of the damn monkey suit.
And for Nancy and CJ, I'm thinking the amount of stuff that goes under a ball gown or couture or an evening gown when a woman wears one, for the guys in the room that don't necessarily know what all we go through, I'm thinking they just want out of a pair of Spanx.
Well,
So I don't want to be standing up in front of all these people when I can be just a little more comfortable.
Even in her, we see several times where the press feels like, what are you wearing to this event?
Yeah.
Is
The
an
state
appropriate
dinner.
question to ask her.
The state dinner
Yeah.
episode when CJ goes off on the entire thing that goes, so we've got a house surrounded here,
And
we've got a hurricane
and
coming,
a this and a
and
that.
a this and a that, and you know what the
My
most often
freaking
question I'm gonna
shoes.
get is about the first lady's shoes.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And I think that's completely valid that a man wouldn't necessarily, like, yeah, I mean, if I was in a situation where something serious happened and I was in a tux, I wouldn't feel the need to almost dress down to business casual or to a suit to make them. But on the other hand, if I was in this and something super serious happened and I had to make like a professional announcement, I might feel the need to throw on a pair of slacks instead
Put
of a
on
pair
a
of
jacket and
jeans,
tie.
Put on a
or
coat
yes,
and tie.
but I certainly wouldn't feel the need to make a wholesale outfit change. It would be like, I should grab a jacket, a sport coat.
And that's not on the show or the writing or the characters, that's on us as a society, that's just how it is. A friend of mine, when she first started watching it, she was very annoyed at how in senior staff there was only CJ and most of the assistants were women. And I'm like, yeah, but when was this made and how realistic are we talking? Because I think the answer to that is pretty realistic. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, we know Dee Myers
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
part of talking about this stuff, and I'm wondering in particular with the dresses, how much it echoes what was happening both in feminism and in the professional world, where women weren't allowed to be feminine. If you were a strong woman, you had to look like a man. And so for me, it made total sense that they would have to change out of the very feminine attire in order to be taken seriously, because that was the Hillary Clinton
Pantsuit
pantsuit.
Nation. Yeah, I'm like, that hasn't gone away, Pantsuit Nation.
That's precisely what I was going to touch on, was just, I also work in a male-dominated field, And yeah, you better believe if I show up one day wearing like a little extra makeup or my hair is actually curled or like pretty jewelry, it's weird. I feel weird. I feel like I have a target on me. Whereas if I show up in my usual blazers and my loafers and look the part, I feel like I have a little bit of armor on. And I feel less vulnerable.
Well, from my perspective, what you guys see me like right now with my hair pulled back and no makeup on, I put on a nicer shirt and a pair of dress pants. This is how I go to work. I put on makeup, fix my hair, or wear a skirt. I work in an entitled, I have one guy in my section. All of the women in my office are like, you got a date? What do you do it at lunchtime? Really? We do this to each other. It doesn't even, we don't even need Sorkin writing it. We do this to each other. So I don't know that.
There's that line, Maggie has a line in like season 2 or 3, I think, of the newsroom when she's talking about, yeah, and I found Hallie's article on blah, 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 but in order to find it, I had to, when I Googled, I had to get through this article on nip slips, that article on nip slips, they never said what the point was. I think they were too busy looking for sexism. And a lot of it is stuff that we see because we're looking for it. Back to like not society, but we as a society are trained to see that stuff. So when we're looking at television, we're trained to look for it. And then we go, oh, that's there. Maybe they didn't put it there on purpose. Maybe we're seeing it because we're conditioned to see it. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I just noticed that even when the women were wearing their business suits and everything, cleavage was there very often, and they had plunging whatever is underneath the
That was more later though than earlier.
I just noticed.
In the West Wing?
Yeah, West Wing.
But I wear that to work, I don't know.
Apparently there was like controversy over Abigail's suit at the dress at the state dinner.
I understand. I totally freaked out when I saw that. I was like, never happened, never.
I'm not sure about the, like, I paid a lot of attention to CJ's wardrobe. I kind of wish I had that stash.
Yeah, well, so say we all.
Well, and I kind of wish I could wear like the suits that she wore with she wore like the blouses that kind of stopped here, except on me, that would be super cleavagey. On her, not so much.
And she still wore, well, like mostly a camisole or.
Yeah.
She was always wearing it. Or something,
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of hoping to touch back on most of the women in the West Wing were assistants, and there was just CJ as senior staff. Because for me, it wasn't so much that it was mostly women, although there is that's very noticeable. Because again, what the time period was, and I'm thinking, I was like, would Toby or Josh be comfortable with a male secretary? I don't know if they would. I think in their head, they would just naturally, because of that kind of internalized sexism that we all have to deal with, I feel like they would be like, oh no, I would much rather, I'd feel more comfortable with a woman in that position. But I feel like you look at the way that all of the male senior staff treat their assistants, it so often is kind of flirting with that harassment line. But then you look at the way CJ interacts with Melissa's character, with her assistant, and they're such solid partners, and they very much support each other, and it's a collaboration. And with the other ones, it's a lot more, I'm the authority, you're gonna do what I say. And it makes me uncomfortable sometimes.
I don't know, I mean, there's just as much, of CJ screaming Carol as there is Josh screaming Donna.
And we don't really see Toby or Sam having that sort of a relationship with the specific.
Doesn't Sam even say she's kind of like a kid sister to me? She's
very
Kathy.
talking about Kathy.
Well, but even referring her in that way is makes me like, oh, she's my kid sister. It's very, and it's kind of dismissive. Like, oh, she's my kid sister, and rather than oh, she is a competent person who,
I think it's more, she's not the annoying kid sister. I think of her as my sister. She happens to be younger than me. That makes her my little sister.
And also not in a I mean, yeah, I guess she's attractive. I don't think of her that way.
Yeah.
That's to me where that comes from. And the banter with everybody, I mean, I'm so glad that he took the time to have Ainsley address it. You know, the thing about, I mean, I don't know if y'all were at my panel with Kim yesterday, or the day before yesterday, but she even said that the thing about porn was her absolute favorite line ever. You know, no, I don't watch porn. You know, where these are just, these women are just as capable of the banter as anybody, and banter is not, office banter is office banter, and it doesn't bother me if it goes there, because they're kidding and I'm kidding, and we know that they're kidding. If some stranger came in and told me that I could make a good dog break his leash, he'd probably get smacked. But if somebody with whom I have that kind of relationship with, you know, remember when Steve Martin got all that crap for saying that Carrie Fisher was pretty on his first impression of her? He's like, on first impression, I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and then I also learned that she was kind and she was blah, blah, blah. And people climbed all up his ass for how dare he have that first impression. And I'm like, what other first impression would you have? You walk in the room and this is what you see. And you know what, Steve Martin, if that's where you stopped, then that's a problem. But he went on to say that that was not where he stopped. I'm like, Steve Martin can say that about me anytime he wants.
Well,
You know?
I know that's something that Aaron Sorkin is very interested in, is the idea of workplace families.
Yeah.
People that they are working 20-hour days, and so the only people they see and the only people they interact with and learn to depend on emotionally are their coworkers and that conflict. And so I feel like that's what a lot of it kind of stems from, because you see that in both the newsroom and the West Wing.
Yeah.
Where it's like everything gets mishmashed up together because these are the only people they see.
And coming back to the assistant thing, I think part of it is that we don't, from our viewpoint, which is necessarily focused on the senior staff, we don't get enough of seeing what the assistants talk about amongst each other. We don't get to see them unless they're needed for a scene with one of the main players, for the most part.
But is that Aaron Sorkin's blind spot? Like, is the fact that we don't see those interactions and have to...
I think that if he tried to put that in, we would have had 2-hour episodes.
I mean, it's,
I mean,
You have to focus on something. I'm
remember
not
when
saying
Star Trek
that
The Next
it's a
Generation did that
good
episode
thing,
Lower
but
Decks?
Yeah.
Star Trek The Next Generation did that episode Lower Decks.
Uh-huh.
That was cool. I would have loved to have had
I
an
would've-
episode
yeah.
of that where it was the
Yeah, I
junior
mean,
staff's
I-
day.
Yes, I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen more interaction between the administrative assistants. And you get maybe 1 or 2 scenes over the first few years, and they slowly disappear
Because just that's not where the story was going.
That's not where the story is going, and you have to cut something when you're writing 5,000 words a minute.
Yeah, for a while.
I'm already on 4 different topics.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had female coworkers that we bantered back and forth, but there are other coworkers I would never banter with that way, because I know they wouldn't like, and mutual respect had already been established.
Exactly.
There was even somewhat of a office friendship bond, and very often, they toss the first one out, so okay, well, I'll hit this pitch, you hit that, and so it's more of a tennis back and forth.
And that's the problem. You can't assume that you have that with everybody, and unfortunately, a lot of people do. Look, I have a very thick skin. For good or bad, I normalize a lot of that crap, and I probably shouldn't as much as I do. For me personally, So like I'm at a party and some guy does some shtick. He's a big guy and he does big guy shtick. He picks me up and hefts me over his shoulder and like takes me out of the room. And I said, haha, very funny motherfucker, open the door. And he did, and there was no problem whatsoever. He did the same thing to some girl that he didn't know who was 22, who freaked. And I don't blame her.
Yeah.
She had she was terrified.
Yeah.
She's like, he shut the door. He physically, Whoa. So I'm like, you know what? You're an idiot, and you need to get a new shtick, and you need to learn to read the room, because yeah. And then I also have to look at myself being like, am I part of the problem because I normalize that? So I sort of had to make myself at least pay a little more attention.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was what you said about female assistants, and that the men not being comfortable with a male assistant secretary. And your point is absolutely right about the sexism aspect. And in addition, there's also often this kind of unspoken thing where a man having a male assistant presumes that male assistant is after their job.
Oh,
It's that old corporate, says the guy who only worked in a corporation for a year of his life. But it's that old corporate moving up the ladder thing. You're trying to go from the mailroom to the CEO, and so it's that kind of unspoken. So
Yeah,
it's a
I see it.
combination of those things.
I see it as a mommy thing. I see it as a mommy thing, where it's your assistant, it's their job to get the thing you need to take care of them, to take care of you basically, for all that you're the boss and saying, do this. Yeah, but if you think about it, who's the one who does that? It's mom. Who's the caregiver most of the time? Some moms suck, some dads are awesome, I'm generalizing. But we're kind of conditioned that the one who's supposed to take care of you and provide and put the pen in your pocket and, and all of that is mom. So, yeah.
What about those instances that no one has touched on, where the assistants are still responsible for getting the coffee, being responsible for what they eat, what their diet is, for putting the pen in the pocket, for getting the popcorn, that kind of thing?
I think that Ginger Get the Popcorn was probably a joke. I don't.
Ordering lunch, that kind
What
of
we,
thing.
what we hear is Ginger get the popcorn. We never know whether or not Ginger was going into the room to watch Sam get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
And we never know that it's just Josh and Toby who are going to enjoy the fact that Sam's getting schooled
We didn't know
by
that.
a blonde Republican
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know how that works. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read that line as, Ginger, you're going to want to come in and watch this.
That too, yeah. I mean, Ainsley is just so, thank God for her. And thank God for Aaron for thinking to write her and for not ignoring the fact. CJ even says, I think people are against her because she's a woman and she's attractive, and that sucks. Because you're not supposed to be. You're not supposed to be successful and attractive and a woman all at once. I'm pretty funny. Women aren't supposed to be. It was Whoopi Goldberg when I was a little wee babby, and I first saw her Broadway show, and she became my freaking hero because it smashed some of those stereotypes of what girls were supposed to be. And no, you're allowed to be funny, you're allowed to be smart, and you don't have to, be blonde. I wasn't that.
For me, I grew up with Carol Burnett. So,
Yeah, that too, same thing.
Yeah.
And Lucille Ball and all of those.
Yeah.
But those weren't, for all that you and I know how attractive Carol Burnett is, that wasn't something that she sold herself on.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That wasn't, she was the funny lady, and you weren't supposed to be that. And obviously she was a smart lady, and you weren't supposed to be all of those things and also perceived as pretty.
Yes.
And so
Oh, I agree.
along comes Ainsley, and it's like, screw you. Yes, you've been waiting.
Just to transition for a moment to how, to Aaron Sorkin specifically and his reputation for how he may write female characters.
Yeah.
I know that that's been addressed a lot on the West Wing Weekly as well. And when I've listened to every episode, and I was, as a noted feminist, was surprised at the things that they were picking up on, like you said, how maybe you look for things and you try to see them when they're not actually there.
I'm like,
And
every time I do, I'm like, stop trying to be my ally, you suck at it, bro.
And I was really surprised, because a lot of these personal relationships have been established, and I think Aaron Sorkin may come off as misogynistic or something like that because of the way he writes the male characters as opposed to how he writes his female characters.
That's a really good point.
I think, as a writer, I think that all of his female characters are some of the strongest women that I've ever watched. CJ, I would argue that Donna is incredibly strong female character.
Yeah.
Josh would be a hot mess without her, and that is not because she's his assistant and he is her boss. That is because she's a strong woman and she knows how to put him in his place. I would argue that Abby is an incredibly strong woman.
Yes.
Amy, though a little immature, is also an incredibly strong woman. Dana Whitaker is an incredibly strong woman.
See, Dana is the only, if we're switching over to Sports Night, that's the only time I get, because Sports Night was kind of like practice, you know how the American president was practice for writing the West Wing? Sports Night was practice for writing the newsroom.
And Natalie, also an incredibly strong female character.
Yeah.
She doesn't get the credit she deserves. And I think that he often writes his male characters as misogynistic. You know, Sam lets the ball slip by Colin Ainsley, a Republican sex pit, and that comes to mind. I think that he writes his male characters often how men realistically are. And he's clearly been in conversations where things like that have been said. And I think that we could say, oh, Aaron Sorkin's a misogynist because he's writing this. Well, maybe that's just how the world is, and he's trying to realistically portray it.
And part of it, you always have to look at it through the lens of where we were when it aired.
Yeah.
So it was 20 years ago, and it doesn't seem like all that long ago, but look at what we faced in the last 20 years, even through the arc of the show of what we went through.
The last year has felt like 20 years.
Well,
I
let's
also
not
find
go there.
myself defending Aaron because I do find him to be an ally of women. I mean, he might, you know, have chauvinistic tendencies from time to time. Who knows? I don't know him personally, but I always like to advocate for him because he writes strong female characters more than a lot of male writers do.
And I gotta say this, there's a reality to the world that, on the podcast, it makes me crazy, that they rip on and say, but it's a reality to the world and you can choose to look at it as something negative, but there are factors with gender, with generations. You know, my best friend is not a West Wing person, but when they had, on the podcast, when they had dissed on the ending of Crackpots and These Women, okay, who wanted to throw things? I wanted to throw things. Because I'm sorry, if the president and Leo, two guys of that generation who know these people and love these people, if they want to stand in a corner and describe me in any of those ways, they can absolutely, they're not saying, oh, look at Margaret, she has a nice ass. You know, they're not saying that. They are praising the crap out of these women, saying, we're not used to women like this. This is unbelievable. Yay! Yes, we are dinosaurs, and we're not used to this, and we're getting used to it, and we love it. So like,
I'm thinking about that because I don't even listen to the podcast, okay? I don't at all. And just hearing about it drives me crazy.
Just want to throw your toys.
I'm like, that's part of the reason I don't want to listen to it, because I'm like, if you guys are going to talk smack about the stuff that I love, because I personally love that scene, I love that conversation between the two of them, and as much as I love it, I can't remember it word for word. I don't remember the president or Leo making a single comment about their appearances.
No.
He says, look at Mandy going
He says,
toe to
look-
toe with Toby. Look how
He says,
strong
look
she
at
is."
them and watch them, not look at them. Going punch for punch.
Even
for
more
Toby.
butch.
You know?
He does make a comment about their physical appearance. He says that CJ's a 50s movie.
Like a
but
saying she's so loving and graceful.
It's a graceful.
Right.
It's not necessarily a, you know.
Exactly. He didn't say all of them.
It's not Lord John talking about magnificent breasts. Okay.
I just wanted to point that I'm not saying I love
You know, you're right,
I
you're right.
appreciate the hating on it, especially considering of their generation. That's how they would, you know,
Compliment.
that's how they would compliment women.
Yeah.
They weren't like putting down by saying somebody is a, you know, looks beautiful doesn't mean that they aren't also smart.
They came from a generation where women led the family, but they did it in silence.
Yeah.
You have to know Bartlett's mother knew what his father was doing and how he was treating his son, but she couldn't stop her husband. We know about Leo's family, and that at some point he becomes, his mother becomes a single mother. We don't know his age, but they wouldn't necessarily have spoken up or spoken out the way CJ and Mandy and any of them are doing. So they wouldn't have, it still would have astonished them for women to go toe for toe,
Yeah.
punch for punch with Toby.
There's also, you can't assume that the characters at the beginning of the series are fully formed. They're learning, they're making mistakes. And I think fandom as a whole is less forgiving of
Yeah.
characters who make mistakes
It's also
now than
we've
they've
watched
ever
these
been
things.
before.
We've watched these episodes all 50 times apiece. We have like 2 seconds left, but I have to bring up CJ and Albie Duncan, because that's another one. I don't find that icky. I found it charming. And you know what? She didn't find it annoying. And when, I'm sorry, but a guy like him, and you say, so, and now that we've done the business, can I get an attractive aide to bring you some Schweppes bitter lemon? She didn't say, can I get an attractive aide to go give you a lap dance? And when she says to Carol, go to work, she knows exactly. You know what? From time out of mind, and still, sorry men in the room, you have been managed by women. We manage you in many ways. It is a power that we have. With all the ones that y'all have, we got this one, we're owning it, we're good at it. And I don't like it when people, because it's not like men can't do that to women also, because they absolutely can. But this thing where it's not, I wouldn't even call it flirting, where it's just applying a little bit of charm to go with your business likeness, it's gonna grease the wheels a little bit.
Well, I mean, so, you talk about, I'm gonna send an attractive aide to bring you a drink. Okay, I don't know any man in any professional world who doesn't use every single weapon in his arsenal to do his job and to excel. If I gotta use my looks, if I've gotta do something, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely gonna. If I gotta.
And these are smart, savvy women who know that this is going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use what I gotta use. And with that, we are 1 minute, we are at time. So thank you guys, thank you for coming. It's been super awesome.